We must not forget that although the U.S. increased the drinking age to 21 in 1984, its rate of traffic accidents and fatalities in the 1980s decreased less than that of European countries whose legal drinking ages are lower than 21. So even though there was a decrease in traffic incidents, that shows that it is not directly correlated to the raising of the drinking age. The stats that our opponents told regarding people 21 years or younger were not sufficient, and rather that all adults in general, that's what they were talking about. And nowhere did they state it was just people under the age of 21. In regards to European countries having a lower drinking age than the US, the statistics mentioned by our opponent are much different for countries in Europe, just because the countries there are much more dense in comparison to the large population that is spread out throughout America. As already stated, in many European countries, the legal drinking age is 18 or lower, and minors are not as compelled to drink as excessively because moderated drinking is a part of the culture. It is not taboo or hidden at house parties or by nearly 10 million young people in unsafe environments in the US, but it is just an everyday part of their culture that is accepted and celebrated. Dr. Georgia Nugent, the interim president of Worcester College, stated, "As a former college president, I have joined with many of my colleagues to advocate lowering the minimum drinking age from 21 to 18 because we believe the 21-year-old limit has created, rather than solved, problems." America's earlier experiment with the prohibition was a notorious failure as well, because Georgia, along with many others, believe that we should learn from our mistakes from the prohibition and realize that restricting adults from participating in this activity that so many do on a daily basis anyways is just causing more problems. She also mentioned that this is just driving drinking underground, as the overwhelming response of young people has been not compliance but contempt for the new law. I am reminding you that we can sign contracts, marry, die for your country, vote, drive, become a legal guardian, own a gun, gamble, go to prison, and way much more. And these are all very big responsibilities for an adult, and they should not be any different with drinking. It should be considered a part of this list of responsibilities for adults as well. The decrease in drunk driving fatalities as a percentage of total traffic fatalities in the U.S. does not correlate to the drinking age. Since 1982, 2 years prior to the Uniform Drinking Age Act established a drinking age of 21, a decline of drunk driving fatalities occurred across all age groups and demographic categories, and therefore cannot be reliably attributed to the drinking age. We need to remember that the statistic of correlating the two is an assumption rather than a fact, and it is not reliable to assume that raising the drinking age is connected to a decrease in traffic accidents, when there was a clear decrease before the law was even set in place. According to the National Institute of Health and the 1995 study of law officers' views on the minimum drinking age, they determined that the drinking age enforcement is not a priority for many law enforcement agencies. Police are inclined to ignore or under-enforce the drinking age because of resource limitations, statutory obstacles, perception that punishments are inadequate, and the time and effort required for processing paperwork. An estimated 2 of every 1,000 occasions of illegal drinking by people under 21 results in an arrest. This shows that people, for the most part, disregard underage drinking, including officers, because it is already so common in our culture, except it is still not legal despite the obvious. We're not saying that we should entirely get rid of the law altogether, but that we should alter it. This would be for the benefit of society. As previously mentioned, it would decrease binge drinking and therefore make it safer for 18 and 20-year-olds to drink, and would eventually be integrated into the culture of America just as Europe has. Once again, we are all well aware of the obvious long list of side effects, such as cancer, liver cirrhosis, and more, and my opponent stated, but being that a long list of responsibilities comes with being the age of 18, so does the decision of taking on the side effects if you choose to do so. We aren't trying to argue that alcohol poisoning is the only way to die from alcohol, rather that more adults die from alcohol than young people, because our opponents fail to provide this information. Jeffrey Tucker, the director of content for the Foundation of Economic Education, said it best. The longer-term gains would be cultural. We could begin to foster a more European-style culture of drinking that promotes responsibility and civilized sobriety. People are more likely to act like adults if you
He's
treat
got the
them
time
as
wrong.
adults.
You're at 5 minutes. I don't know what he's doing, so.
I-
No, 4-minute rebuttals.
yeah.
The rebuttals are 4 minutes. The first 4 speeches are 7 minutes, so. Sorry to cut you off, but, you've been going for 5 minutes. Thank you all. It's not your fault. I should have reminded you. Don't worry about it. It's okay. It's okay. Everybody else kind of was stopping then. I think I gave a time signal to one person earlier in the rebuttals, and I just happened to look over and he's giving you a minute, and I'm going, wait, he's 5 minutes. What? No, that's not right. So I'm sorry to interrupt you, but all right. Hang on one second. All right, I thought you guys all did a very good job trying to kind of keep things organized and developing very good information on the arguments. There are a couple of places where I think there needs to be a little bit more contrast on the arguments being presented by the other side. So, for instance, the affirmative is arguing that these harms that you talk about, for instance, they all are long-term kinds of harms, and it's not necessarily unique to people who are drinking below the age of 21. And I think that that's a good argument on all of those generic things. But you did have some evidence that suggested that the earlier people start, the more they have those particular problems, that there's a link to starting earlier, that sort of thing. And you need to come back and talk about that in the last part of the debate. It's like, you said that early on, and then it doesn't come back, and that's the answer to their particular point there. Another answer that I think you have that you need to get more use out of is that people are they're already drinking. The drinking laws are not preventing people from drinking. That's kind of the argument that you're making right at the end of the last rebuttal, is that nobody's enforcing these laws anyway, and so it's not having an effect on the drinking that's going on. I think that that's a good argument to make, although they have an argument about this that says alcohol consumption did decrease when we raised the drinking age. So why you're not taking advantage of that argument, I don't know. I think there's a lot of good evidence on your side that gets presented, and then there's not much contrast to what the affirmative is saying. I think you develop a good argument about this value issue that is developed a lot more than their answers are. I think you've got a couple of answers to this, but you're letting them kind of drive the issue on this idea of what our responsibilities are, that sort of thing. And because they pay more attention to it than you do, their argument is going to come across as a lot more credible in the long run. Some of the things that you're missing that just kind of jump out immediately, they keep making this argument about how great Europe is and the comparisons, and I'm going, you've got evidence that says the lower drinking ages in Europe have resulted in twice as much binge drinking as exists in the United States. That's the argument that they're making, and you're the only ones providing any evidence that suggests what the binge drinking. Why are you not screaming about this? You should be jumping up and down saying, you want to be like Europe? Here's what Europe's like. They have twice as much binge drinking. They have more cirrhosis of the liver. They got all these other harms. And that's because they've got these low drinking ages. People just start earlier. They get used to drinking. They say, oh, no, it'll become part of the normal culture. And you say, yeah, it becomes part of the normal culture where they all do these horrible, dumbass things. The idea that Europe is somehow so much better off than us is problematic. Now, you guys make some claims about auto accidents and that sort of thing in Europe. And I'm going, I heard the claim. I didn't hear the evidence. I think there's probably evidence that you've got. You need to make sure that you cite that source. I didn't really hear that. You guys have good evidence on the auto accident thing that you basically abandon, and don't say anything more about. And I think that that's a good argument to be making. Your response is that it could be something else that's causing this. You've got this interesting argument that says, well, the trend was already in this other direction. And then we've got the one guy who says, it could be all these other kinds of things. Here's a place where I think that you've made the right answer to this argument. You've got a good argument here, and you have ignored an important thing to do. Let's contrast the evidence that's being presented. Who are you presenting that suggests that this has had a significant impact? National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, the Center for Disease Control, the National Institute of Alcoholism and Alcohol Abuse. And who are they quoting? They're quoting a civil libertarian who says that maybe there's some other explanation for this kind of issue. So, and you've got a whole bunch of academic studies that have found this kind of thing. So basically what the affirmative is saying is all the academics are too damn stupid to see what's going on, and the government was too damn stupid to see what's going on, and this guy knows what the hell's going on, and you're going, why are we supposed to believe their evidence over your evidence? You don't do that contrast at all. That's a point that I think you are missing, and it seems like it would make a hell of a lot more sense. I think that the affirmative is very effectively parrying a lot of the arguments that you present, and not because their evidence is better, but because they are making responses to some of those points. And so I think they're getting a little bit of additional advantage on that. They do a much better job summarizing their position at the end of the debate. You guys are kind of focused on individual points, and you need to look at the big picture. I think you've also got a good argument that you made that disappears after it gets made. That is, hey, cigarette smoking's bad. We know that it's bad. The direction of age is going up to 21 in a lot of places. Why would we make this dumbass decision that's going on here just because, and who are the consequences to? The consequences to drunk driving are to everybody. The consequences to society are to people who chose to drink, but also, people who weren't very bright when they chose to drink because they were so, I shouldn't say very bright, but you've got this argument about impulsiveness. You should be getting more out of that. And I just don't think that you get as much out of the evidence that you have as you could be getting, and that they're giving good answers on those points, but not great answers. If you made the additional effort, you'd be in better shape in the comparison. I thought you guys did a very good job trying to take what you had and make good arguments out of it and respond to the position that they're taking. I also appreciated that both sides seemed to be listening to what the other side was saying. There were responses to each argument that the other side was saying. Sometimes the arguments were good, sometimes they weren't so good. This is the first time through, so nobody's going to be perfect. I'm pointing out things that you could do better. I hope I don't sound like I'm being too negative about things, because I thought you guys all did a very good job in the debate. I thought there was really good research there, and you made a good effort to respond to issues. I'm just trying to point out sometimes you need to look at the kind of big picture issues too, and you miss some of those. And you don't need to miss those because you've got information in there to make those arguments, and you're doing a good job on that. What did you guys think?
I thought both sides were pretty close up until the rebuttals, when they sort of pulled away, because they were really countering what the negative said, and that's sort of what made my decision go towards the affirmative.
All right, so it was kind of like in the rebuttals, the negative was not. What did they not do that you thought? You said the affirmative started to pull away, and by
the affirmative was talking about what the negative was saying, and was talking about why some of those weren't really correct.
Parrying some of the arguments,
but
okay.
With the negative, they were just sometimes stating more evidence,
okay.
more numbers. I didn't really think it countered.
Kind of repeating the same thing without addressing the claim that the affirmative is making on it. Okay.
I like the sort of alternative argument the affirmative brought up. I think in the first speech, the one of the permanent license one, driving, and I kind of wanted to see the negative either address that or kind of show why it's not comparable to driving in a certain way, because I feel like that would have been a point to I think that was a good point to argue on. And just that didn't happen, but even still, the argument was.
Well, here's another example of something that kind of gets left on there. You guys never addressed this issue really very much on this, about why do we have these differences in the age groups for doing particular things? And I think I mean, you kind of address it a little bit because of what happens to people who drink young and those kinds of things. But why do we have those kinds of things? Because it's exactly the sort of thing that you're talking about, maturity, and we're learning about something. So we have differential ages for a variety of things. And I think that addresses this fairness issue also to some degree. You can get a learner's permit when you're 15. You can get a driver's license that's usually limited to some degree when you're 16. It's not completely open until you're 18. Drinking at 21. The gambling thing, I think, is, they mentioned that you can gamble at 18. Some places, some circumstances, I think you would find the vast majority of the restrictions are at 21. There's an opportunity. And then there are a whole bunch of other things that, even though you're an adult, you're not allowed to do until you are older. I know you didn't have the evidence. I can't give you the evidence on this. But there's a whole bunch of other things like renting a car. You can own a gun, but you can't own a handgun. That kind of, or you can't buy a handgun, for instance, in most states. There's some other things about, what are some of the other ones that people mention? Then there's always the political ones that come up that you can't run for offices until a particular age. Here's the one that I think people have missed, and I don't understand how you've missed this. You can stay on your parents' insurance until you're 26 years old? Wait a second. We're adults at 18, but we're being babied until we're 26 when it comes to our insurance issue? Why is this 18 thing so magical only when we're talking about drinking, but it's not so magical in all these other contexts? I think that there's a value argument to be made there that you guys just don't make. You make the good medical argument and don't extend it as well as you could have, but it's a good argument. But I just think there's some other things that you could make that you're letting them kind of walk over you on. And I think that's a little bit of a problem for you. Opportunities, lost opportunities. That doesn't mean that you guys did a bad job. You did a very good job. It just seems like, I kind of agreed. In the rebuttals, things, you're missing some of the things that they are paying attention to. All right. Anything else that you guys thought of? Any arguments that you thought were really good that you think, if you were deciding, you would decide on that issue? Or did you think of anything else that you thought might have been a good argument?
The comment about having to be able at 18 critically think, you're not allowed to drink, that was a really good argument. 'Cause we're expected to, at 18, be able to cognitively think about our decisions, yet we're not able to make certain decisions.
Okay, yeah, that's kind of the thing that we were talking about. All right, and the underground drinking thing, that's another one of those things that came up a little bit at the end, and I think your binge drinking argument answers that point, but you need to make those applications. It's like, these college presidents keep talking about this. You know why the college presidents talk about it? Because they're college presidents and they're looking at the crap that happens on the college campus. That kind of stuff does happen on the college campus. And you've got that evidence, about Europe. What is it? Great Britain, it's 50% binge drinking, and Denmark, it's 61%, and the United States is at 24%. We're at half the levels of all these other places. And this is, like I said, to me, that seems like the one thing that answers a half dozen of the things that they're talking about. And you're not taking advantage of that. It's right there in front of you. And just a little strategic thinking, I think, fixes those things. But you guys all did a very good job. I appreciate it. There are binder clips and rubber bands there if you need them for your evidence. Make sure you put your name on the evidence. I had to guess a couple of times in the last few days as to who the evidence belongs to. You don't want to do that. Peer evaluations, put them on the table up there next to maybe on the left side. All right? Thank you. Left. There you go.